Let's queer up the courts. Kansas AG sues the state to block trans people from changing state IDs. On Friday, the Republican Attorney General of Kansas sued to force the state to be among the few that prohibit transgender people from changing their sex on their driver's licenses and to repudiate the Democratic governor, who continues to allow such changes despite a new anti-trans law. Attorney General Kris Kobach filed his lawsuit in state court, seeking an order to stop Governor Laura Kelly and agencies under her control from letting transgender people change their licenses. Kobach contends a law that took effect Saturday prevents such changes and requires the state to reverse any previous changes in its records. Kobach has argued that the law applies in the same way to birth certificates, but the lawsuit filed doesn't address those documents. The settlement of a 2018 federal lawsuit required Kansas to allow transgender people to change their birth certificates. Even with a raft of measures targeting transgender people in state houses across the U.S. this year, Kansas would be atypical for not allowing them to change sex or gender markers on birth certificates, driver's license, and more. More than 900 people in Kansas have changed their listing for sex on their birth certificates in the past 4 years. The most interesting thing here for me of what the Attorney General is pursuing is, first, he's going against the governor, which is a Democratic governor in Kansas. Kansas, like the women's decision that the public voted on abortion rights, is kind of conflicted right now. And this is a perfect example of the Attorney General and the governor fighting over really kind of settled law, because the Supreme Court ruled that transgender people had the right to change their birth certificates. And so as a result, he is saying, well, it's not specifically a ruling on your driver's license, so therefore I'm going to go after driver's license name changes. And from my view, it's silly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if it moves back into the courts and ultimately to the Supreme Court, Kansas is going to lose again. But it just seems like the Attorney General just has literally a hard-on for trans people.
But literally, this fight between the Attorney General and the governor highlights a modern issue in modern politics, especially in conservative states, which is most of the time these conservative states have won their Senate races, whereas Democrats win half of the governor's races. And that creates sort of this dichotomy between a very liberal governor and a very conservative senator.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You know who I'm thinking about, though, are those 900 people that changed, right? That had their legal paperwork to match who they are legitimately heart, you know? So it's like you had to jump through all these hoops, all these obstacles to get the paperwork done, to get all that done. You have your license that matches your true gender identity. You are who you are. And then you're going to get another one in the mail going backwards. Like, how freaking dare you? You know, I mean, suicide is at an all-time high in our community, right? And things like this just push people to have those awful thoughts.
Yeah. And I mean, exactly your point. It's 900 people.
900
over 4 years. And we're telling these people that does, frankly, as a trans person, I'm tired. I'm tired of like talking about this. Just let's leave me alone. Let me have my license. Let me have my birth certificate.
Yeah.
Not hurting anybody.
How does that affect you? You know?
I'm curious beyond that question. That's the big question. Why are you doing this? Again, I always make the point, Mateo does not speak for the entire trans community, but how does the trans community process something like this? Birth certificates are settled constitutional law by the Supreme Court. And this Attorney General comes in and splits a hair on that interpretation to say, oh, we're talking about driver's license. And I think it applies to your birth certificate, which it doesn't because the Supreme Court's ruled on it. But I'll throw that in for measure too, but my lawsuit doesn't deal with it because I would lose in the courts because the Supreme Court's already decided. How does the trans community respond to the frustration of this?
I mean, I know a lot of people already weren't even changing their birth certificate because you don't need it for as many things. You need the license, you need your social security, you need your passport, but the birth certificate, for some people, it's very meaningful to have that change.
Yes.
And for others, if it's not necessary, then it's just more hoops, as you were saying, and a cost and a whole stack of papers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I want to say that I realized just in this last week, I was at the Floatorama
Flockfest.
event.
No, Floatorama a couple weeks ago.
Yes, and coming home for it, I didn't drink. Thank goodness, and I wouldn't. But I'm on my way home, and I moved across a lane right on Federal, too far, and there was a police car right next to me. And I cut him off a little, the police officer, and he pulled, and the lights come on, and I pull into a shopping center, and basically he reads me the riot act of what I was doing, asked me if I had been drinking. No, I haven't been drinking, etc. And I thought to myself, if I would have presented my registration and driver's license as being, I reflect as a trans woman, but I would have presented the driver's license, I would have been into all kinds of situations that I don't know what I would have been getting into.
No, they let you go because you're white.
And they
That's the thing.
They let me go because I'm white. And at the end of the day, while many people listening to us will say 800 people, you know, and et cetera, it's not a big deal. It is an incredibly big deal because my privilege is not, you know, what that especially a trans woman of color's privilege is.
Yep.
A simple traffic stop can open a world of hurt on these people.
And don't try to travel as a trans person. I mean, come on, you know, you have a passport that says one thing, you have a license that says something else, and then your name is something different through Southwest. You know what I mean? Like, what a cluster F.
I mean, I thought about getting the new X on your passport, but then I'm like, well, what about if we want to go to certain countries?
Yes.
I don't know if I want to
Put a target on your head. Yes.
Exactly.
So. Okay. We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out Television Network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ+ community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.